to the third and final installment of my video series on the band Gorkys Zygotic Mynci. In the last video, I talked about the transition in their sound that happened after the album Gorky 5, which marked a movement away from the whimsical, chaotic sound of their very psychedelic early work towards something more down to earth. In this video, I'll be covering the final era of their career when they shed the last of those experimental tendencies. As always, I'm Hans from Electric Brain, Electric Shadow. Our new single, The White Gardens of the Moon, is available here on YouTube or on your favorite streaming services, and of course on Bandcamp. Check it out if you're a fan of progressive folk rock. Following Spanish dance troupe, they released The Blue Trees in 2000. This is an 8-song, 25-minute set, which walks the line between an EP and a very short, small album. This feels like the logical extension of the pastoral aspects of Barafundal and Spanish dance troupe. It focuses and distills those aspects into their purest possible form. It's almost entirely acoustic, and the lyrics for this album leave behind the surrealism and violence of their previous works in favor of small, quiet vignettes. And the simple mix and arrangement makes it really clear how well Euros's vocals are blending now with Richard James's, as in the track This Summer's Been Good from the Start.
Well, this summer's been good from the start, and it looks like we never shall part. Where are we going? I don't know. How do we get there? So and so.
The simplicity and the unambitious nature of this piece actually kind of paradoxically become their own form of ambition. There's a particular creative intensity involved in pushing themselves to make something so low-key, and this is really an utterly charming work that is, I think, somewhat easy to underrate. And despite the sunniness and optimism of a lot of the lyrical content, the instrumentals will sometimes evoke the strangeness and menace and mystery of the countryside in the same way as some of the classic late 60s folk or the movie The Wicker Man, right? A good example being the song Foot and Mouth 68. In 2001, they released How I Long to Feel That Summer in My Heart, which was the unadulterated pop album that they'd always kind of been threatening to make. With Blue Trees, they had stripped away the weirdness, the experiments, the multi-part songs. They'd stripped those things back to find the core of beauty and melodic bittersweetness that was always at the center of what they did. And on this album, they built back up, replacing those qualities with analog retro-pop lushness. In the last album, when I was talking about the single If Fingers Were Xylophones, I talked about the layers of classic instrumentation that they pile onto that song. On this album, they apply that production approach to every single song on the album, piling on horns, flutes, slide guitar, banjo, live strings, vibes, organs, electric piano. Lyrics have an occasional touch of weird imagery. There is one song from the perspective of a violent stalker, but for the most part they're dealing here with more straightforward themes of love and loss and longing. Richard James does some of his best all-time writing and vocal work here, and his style as a writer and singer on this album really becomes fully integrated with Euros's, which really gives the whole album a wonderful sense of unity, for example, in the main single, Stood on Gold. since Gorkys had first received American distribution with Introducing, I had purchased everything of theirs in the week of release. I had usually pre-ordered it if I was aware it was coming. But I actually didn't buy or even listen to their final album, Sleep Holiday, for nearly 10 years after it came out. And the reason was, up through How I Long to Feel That Summer in My Heart, it always felt like there was less music in the world than I wanted there to be. I would regularly buy albums by bands like Godsmack or Stained that I understood pretty well were somewhere between mediocre and shitty, but it was some way of having a common interest with people around me, and I just wasn't sure really what else there might be. And somewhere around 17 years old, I figured out, first of all, that there was in fact a whole world of progressive rock outside of the kind of Genesis, Yes, King Crimson axis that I was so familiar with. And second, that a lot of what I loved about classic progressive rock was currently also happening in contemporary black metal and death metal. And suddenly the world of music seemed richer than I had ever understood or could ever hope to experience. And it all of a sudden seemed like a constant scramble to take in everything I had missed. And I never really had the attention or the time or the money for every good thing that I knew was out there. And that dizzying feeling, right, that there's more than I can ever hope to understand or appreciate, that feeling actually has persisted to this day, although over the course of a couple decades, it's drifted somewhat from being exciting and tantalizing toward almost pushing me into sometimes exhaustion or nihilism. But that's a topic for another day. I bought Sleep Holiday in 2012, which was a period in my life where I was trying to plug some gaps in my collection. Around that time, I also shelled out for a CD copy of Patio. I bought the post-angst CD singles, so I had all the later B-sides. And back in 2012, when I first listened to Sleep Holiday, I liked it, but it felt like a step down. I thought at the time that it doesn't quite have the distinct personality within their catalog that some other things do. The arrangements aren't lush and dense like they are on How I Long, but they're also not stripped down like they are on Blue Trees. The songs are a bit longer, but not in a way that involves introducing more parts. The average tempo feels a little bit slower than maybe it should be. More than anything else, this album feels exhausted. It feels tired. It's often beautiful, but sometimes it can be fatiguing to listen to because it feels fatigued. But unlike Gorky 5, which was also a slow album that felt discouraged and exhausted, it really doesn't have any undercurrent of anger or violence. Okay, I'm running out of gas here. I just need to get this done. Now, when I bought this album in 2012, that tired quality felt like a drag. Now I'm pushing 40. A lot of the dreams that I had 10 years ago maybe haven't panned out the way that I hoped they would. And that feeling is much more identifiable, much more moving to me. I really like the album a lot more than I used to. If anything, the most minimal and quiet moments on this album are the most effective, such as the song Pretty as a Bee, in which a yearning love ballad sort of gradually emerges out of a drone over the course of 10 minutes. Now, Euros has been working consistently as a solo artist since the band broke up, and in many ways you could argue he's actually been more accomplished in his solo work. He's covered a wider range of styles and sounds, and has really grown as a lyricist in a very impressive way. But there's something, for lack of a more articulate word, something magical about this body of work that's become clear to me as I've gotten older. In preparation for this video, I tried to read as many contemporary reviews as I could, and one thing that struck me was how, even while they were active, there was already a narrative emerging that they were underrated and unlucky. Time, I think, has shown that prediction to be resoundingly correct, maybe more so than it seemed then. Now, granted, my perspective might be partly affected by living in the US, where they never had even the level of exposure that they did in the UK, but it seems to me like this is a band which spent a decade releasing music which was just unsurpassed in its combination of imagination and listenability, and hardly anybody seems to acknowledge now that they ever existed. I don't know ultimately if that's the worst thing, really. Traditionally, I guess I would end this video with a call for the whole catalog to be put on streaming. I'd end with a call for, a deluxe reissue collection with 5.1 surround mixes, alternate versions, maybe a reunion tour to go with all that. But I don't personally know if I want any of that, really. The world had its shot with this band. The world fucked it up. Maybe they don't deserve another shot. Maybe that's a misanthropic conclusion to reach. Maybe the band members could use the back royalties that would come from having it on streaming and doing a reissue program. Maybe all that is an odd conclusion to reach when I am, in fact, taking time to go on the internet and broadcast the opinion that they are a wonderful, underrated band that in a just world more people would have listened to. But no matter what, they're one of those bands, along with early Genesis, The Church, a few similar things, that have done the most to create an imaginative psychic space that was there when I really needed it. I'm forever appreciative of that. Thanks very much to everyone who watched, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.